work. Oh, we're live.
All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Monta Knutson here again with Coffee with Monta. We're doing this every Friday morning now at 9 a.m. And we started this when COVID started, and I think we're just going to probably continue this on as a regular Bridges to Change offering on Fridays. And so we're super excited. This week, we have Cameron Whitten on. And Cameron comes with so much experience, especially as a person who has, escaped out of homelessness as a youth in recovery, and also is, I believe you're running for District 5, Metro District 5, right?
Yes. Good morning, Monta. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Yeah. We have so many questions for you today. Especially around your initiatives and your interest in attacking and helping solve our houselessness crisis and your affordable housing thoughts. But
I wouldn't say attacking. I'm more of a pacifist.
Yes. But you want to get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we always say, like war on poverty, war on this and that. And I'm like,
good point.
Why are we setting ourselves up to get aggressive and get angry? I think that's part of what's failed in our society. We've got to look at these things as we're building, like wars destroy. We know wars destroy. We got to really look at what we're growing and nurturing for the future. And so I think our community needs a lot of healing, and let's focus on that instead of focusing on what we're going to destroy and eliminate.
Yeah, no, thank you for that correction. I'll keep that in my pocket.
I'm so woke.
Yeah, I'm so woke. Thank you for that. To kick us off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your journey, your recovery journey? Like, what makes Cameron who you are today?
That's a big question. I am a different person every day, and I'm seeing even during this pandemic how much just an event can happen and change your life forever. And having been somebody who has lived a life of tumult, I've had many of these events. But what I do believe is that we as people are resilient. And because I know we as people are resilient, I know that I'm resilient. And so I'm grateful to be where I am today, being a fierce advocate for others, because I know that a better future is possible. And my story is one where I experienced many challenges at an early age. I was raised in an abusive home. I had a father who was abusive emotionally and physically. And I remember by the time I was 17 years old, I walked into my guidance counselor's office, Ms. Pomeranski, and I had 2 soccer bags in my hand, and I dumped them on the floor of her office. And I said to her, I'm not going back home. And this one person, this one adult took care of me. She made sure that I had food. She made sure that I could leave class and speak to a counselor, anything she could do to keep me in school. And so while I completed my senior year at a friend's house, I actually had safety, and I had people who understood me and encouraged me to keep going. And, I didn't even think about, I was so wrapped up in my trauma that I wasn't even thinking about what my next steps were in life. And she went to the Rotary Club and got me a scholarship. And then, I ultimately ended up leaving my hometown and everything behind. And when I came to Portland, she actually made sure that that scholarship got transferred here so that I could continue my school. And so, we've been able to keep a relationship for the longest time. And I think about her a lot when I think about the ability to, the fact that one person can make such a tremendous difference in somebody else's life. And all you really need to do is believe in that person and help them believe in themselves. And so, when I got to Portland, it was rocky. I had no family to support me. I had no resources, no jobs. I barely graduated high school, and I was homeless. And for 2 months, I was, terrified. every single night, whether I would be turned away from a shelter bed and have nowhere to go. Living on the margins with real daily struggles gave me a unique perspective into the deep realities of inequity in our society. But I also saw the best of Portland. And it was thanks to the generous help of local nonprofits and the people behind them that I wasn't turned away from shelter. I and others like me had access to resources so that we could find housing, find employment, and ultimately define our own future. And so ever since then, I have had the privilege to give back to the same community that was there for me when I've needed it the most. I have served some of our most vulnerable Portlanders as the executive director of local nonprofits, such as Know Your City and the Q Center. We are dealing with a crisis in Portland, in our region, and across the world. And I truly believe that we need to do more to listen to and uplift the voices of people who are most directly impacted by these issues, because that is the way that we will really start to change the way our society operates, will change culture, will change policy, and will truly be an inclusive place where every person has a chance to thrive.
Well, it sounds like your story is so powerful, and one of the three areas of focus at Bridges, we have housing, mentorship, and treatment services. But our peer mentors, our recovery mentors, our mental health peers that really just have the ability to impact someone's recovery process by that, because we just like you shared, like that one person caused such a great change in trajectory in your life. We just don't know what we're gonna, how we're gonna be able to impact somebody. And so it really speaks to the work that we're doing here at Bridges with our peers that are.
I've been a fan of you for a very long time, Monta.
Yeah. So with your journey and your history, how do you see that playing forward in kind of the changes that you would like to see happen in the Portland metro area? And you're specifically in kind of the northeast area of which is District 5.
Yeah.
One of the challenges we have as a housing provider. So for example, we have about 60 plus recovery homes in the Portland metro area. We only have one in Northeast Portland. In fact, we are trying to open up some other houses, but I can't get a 3,000 foot, or 3,000 square foot 7-bedroom house for like under 600,000 or 850.
Yeah.
Where it's costing us like 400,000. And so how do we help bring people of color back to Northeast Portland if we're so priced out of being part of that process?
Thank you for saying that, Monta. Portland has a history that it needs to grapple with. We have evolved a lot, and for good reason. Portlanders really celebrate our progressive values and the ways that we innovate and lead on policy, but we also are burdened with a long history of discrimination. And one thing that I talk a lot about is the history of redlining. And for folks who don't know, across this country, there were covenants between neighborhood associations, lenders, and realtors to actually deny Black people, Chinese people, other Black indigenous people, the ability to get loans and buy property in areas that were considered choice communities. This started to create the ghettos as we know it, where you could determine by zip code who would thrive and who would not. And even though redlining is now an illegal practice, we have seen huge levels of displacement, in large part thanks to a reverse in disinvestment to hyperinvestment in communities that displace people and force them out. And so what I say to people is, redlining did not end. It just changed its form. So we still have redline communities. We still have communities who, because of their zip code, have less access to good education, have less access to safe transportation and have less access to prosperity. And so the challenge that we have is, how do we grapple with that reality? And we obviously aren't thinking bold enough. One of the comparisons that I have is to a forest fire. And I think it speaks well for the coronavirus pandemic, and also speaks to the conversation around gentrification and displacement. You lose so much when there's a forest fire, and we should grieve what we've lost. But after a forest fire, that is when the soil is the most fertile, and that is when new life and new diversity comes into an area. And so we have seen huge devastation in North and Northeast Portland. As somebody who identifies as Black, as somebody who's spent a decade of advocacy here in North and Northeast Portland, it hurts me to see the injustices that have happened and perpetuated here. But we can't just say the forest burned down, it's done, it's gone. We have the ability to grow into something new. And if we believe in justice, that means we have to get our elbows into the soil and make it happen. And so it's going to take a huge amount of investment. We've seen some changes to support right of return, but we have to do more of that. And on top of really investing in real right of return, we have to support we know that North and Northeast Portland has changed culturally. And we also know that our cultural hubs, such as our schools, we have Boyce Eliot Humboldt, we have SCI, we have our Black churches that are here, like Vancouver Avenue Baptist Church. We have the Masons, what's the name of that group? The Masons group on Mississippi and Fremont. It's early, y'all. We have the June Key Delta Center on Ainsworth. We have all of these Black cultural institutions. As much as we support right of return in terms of residential units, we have to support cultural right of return because the heart of North and Northeast the Black community had its heart in North and Northeast Portland. Our communities are still here. Many people were displaced, but many people are still here and still want to be a part of community. We have to support that and make sure that happens. And so it's going to take courageous action. I believe Metro has the ability to support with our expertise around planning, but we also need to work with our public sector, our city. We need to work with our private sector to ensure that we have real goals of justice. And it's going to help Portland as a whole be a more equitable city.
Yeah. And do you feel in the current kind of political environment, we have, of course, the mayor's office and city council and the chair's office and our commissioners and Metro, do you feel like we have a lot of good players at the table to kind of push these initiatives or help move these initiatives along to be successful?
I think there's a lot of room for improvement. We are grappling with a lot of issues, whether that's affordable housing, whether that's transportation, climate change, the economy. We have a lot of issues. We have to be able to look at these issues holistically. A great example is our upcoming T2020 transportation package that Metro is proposing, $7 billion. We know what happens when we have huge amounts of public investment in an area. Property values go up, people get displaced. We have learned how devastating that is, and we especially know that in North and Northeast Portland with I-5, 99 West. We are talking about thousands of homes just completely demolished because of eminent domain, and then the shock waves of property values also resulting in displacement. And so with this ballot measure, they're proposing about a 2% set aside for anti-displacement. And to me, that's offensive. We know that displacement is serious, and we know how big of an impact that it has. We need to actually have a real index of what does $1 of public investment mean, and what do you need to match that with anti-displacement resources? Those need to be as close together as possible. And instead of actually doing that study and really having that understanding, we're just saying, great, here's 2% of $7 billion, don't get displaced. It's not enough. And if we really do care about reversing the impacts of displacement, we need to know what's going to take to make it happen and actually fund that. And so a budget's always about your priorities. If we really believe in anti-displacement, we're going to fund it. I do want to give a shout out. There is proactive work happening with Albina Vision. This is a coalition of African-American leaders who are reclaiming area that has been lost for decades. We need to see that to success, but that's just a couple thousand square feet. There, Northeast Portland, there is so much more we can be to imagine, to support the work that you're doing and support the community that is still here, and so Portland can be a more equitable city.
Yeah, no, that's also important. And I think you also called out, getting the private sector involved. And that's going to need to be done by way of, keeping them interested in investment. That's going to have some type of return if we're going to have folks coming into North and Northeast, essentially to make money. How do we bring folks back and support the initiatives that you're talking about where the private sector is interested in doing that? And we have to be able to do that in a way that brings them and keeps them to that kind of market. One of the things that we're doing right now at Bridges that I'll share with you, it's our small piece that we're able to contribute to North and Northeast right now is we currently received a grant from HealthShare, one of the care coordinated organizations.
Yeah.
And so we partnered with Miracles. And so we currently have had a house in between Alberta and Killingsworth on 25th. It's been a women's rental house for years. We opened up another women's house in Southeast, and we got everybody transferred over there. And partnering with Miracles to bring, in this case, Black men back to Northeast Portland. And so we'll be partnering with Miracles to provide the peer services, and we're going to be providing the housing piece for them, and then just work in collaboration. So we're super excited to start some work here in Northeast Portland.
That's good. And culturally responsive programming is so important. That's something that I know, from my own experience in the homeless youth continuum. I am grateful for the social workers that were there to do really hard work and put their lives at risk. And at the same time, a big part of the reason why I'm no longer homeless is because of my own ability to, take control of my life. And the folks who helped me the most were folks who helped to empathize with who I was and to make me really feel like a whole and dignified human being. And so the best people who can do that work are people who have that lived experience.
Yeah. One of our other areas of focus, we work with a lot of folks that are coming out of the criminal justice system, justice involved individuals. And then also as a peer-run organization, over 85% of our staff have lived experience. I personally spent about 10 years incarcerated from 1987 to 2005, in and out.
Dang, you were in there when I was born.
I know, right? It was interesting. I was washing my truck off of MLK, which used to be Union Avenue back in the day. And across from that car wash on MLK now is a giant condo, but it used to be this smaller, dilapidated fourplex that I used to live in when I was homeless at the age of 15 years old with a crack addiction. And then I kind of look at how North and Northeast has changed and how my life has changed. But this kind of leads me to my next question around criminal justice reform. And we know that there is an overrepresentation of people of color that are, disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. Do you have any experience in advocating in any way for criminal justice reform, or do you have any of those plans in your work moving forward?
Yeah, what I would say is that our criminal justice system is an evolved extension of slavery. And so it should not be a surprise to anyone that our justice system is mostly targeting Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. It's the way that the system was designed to set up in the first place. I, as a young Black person, I've experienced discrimination from law enforcement on public transportation. It is something that was very well covered by the Oregonian. Fortunately, I'm not somebody you can mess with, but I have a privileged story. When I was arrested on the streetcar, within seconds, I was on the phone with the director of Portland's Bureau of Transportation. That is not something that pretty much any other Black, brown, or Indigenous person in Portland or Oregon have. And so I know how lucky I am. And our justice system should make sure that everyone has the privilege for real representation and real protection. And so we know that our system is broken. For Metro Council, there's no specific role in public safety, but I am a strong advocate for criminal justice reform. I've got much stronger opinions than many people who are currently in elected office, and that's because of lived experience. We have, one of my biggest frustrations, which I think for all of us, is that we have elected officials who don't have lived experience. And when we're saying, hey, I have a criminal record, I can't find housing or employment, or hey, my kid is failing in school, what do I do? These are folks who see that as data points and don't actually have that lived experience, and we miss the urgency. And we spend all this time trying to educate people so they understand what's the right thing to do and what's the best policy. And instead, we need to allow the people who are directly impacted to lead. We know that our criminal justice system is broken, and yet we continue to perpetuate the same inequities over and over again. I'm personally saddened to see the number of people who are in prison and also detainees of ICE whose lives are now under jeopardy because of the pandemic. And we are not doing enough to actually pardon people and get people out of these prisons who are ready to be reintegrated into our society. And so, I believe that there's much more we need to do, and I'll continue to be an advocate for that.
Yeah, and you're uniquely positioned to do that, and super excited to see your name on the ballot. Personally, as you know, Bridges to Change can't endorse any candidates, but I live in North and Northeast Portland. I have your sign in my front yard, so I'm super excited to see you on the ballot. Shifting gears a little bit more, especially with your previous experience working at the Q Center.
Yeah.
One of our other programs, I don't know if you know this, but last year we opened the first LGBTQ plus house off of Burnside and 40th, partnered with Quest. So Quest is doing the treatment services and the peer services, and we're operating the house similar to what we're doing with Miracles, working on that project.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing program. The focus is prioritizing folks that identify as trans, and I also have a trans daughter. And so how do you see your kind of work in your role moving in, or, if you were elected for District 5 to help impact and cause change for our LGBTQ plus folks?
Yeah, thank you for that, Monta. And I served for 2 years as the exec director of Q Center. And to me, it was truly, truly shocking to hear from many allies who have a perception that marriage equality has passed. We have passed some protections statewide and federally. Stamp of approval, LGBTQ equality is here. And the reality is when you start looking at the intersections, whether that's trans people, Black, brown, Indigenous people, undocumented people, disabled people, poor people, people impacted, by crime or drug addiction. When you start looking at those layers, you're starting to see even bigger disparities once you add on somebody's sexual or gender orientation. And so there's so much more we need to do to have truly lived LGBTQ plus equality. And so as somebody who has had the privilege to work with this beautiful community, I want to be a strong champion for them. A big part of that is representation. We are allegedly 4% of the population. I actually think everybody's gay, but we'll work on that. But when it comes to elected office, less than 1%, half of 1% of LGBTQ people are in elected office. So we have a huge issue of representation. And so we need to do more to have real culturally specific services, especially for our trans community. It was heartbreaking to be executive director for 2 years of Q Center. Every year I was there, we had a vigil for a trans woman who was houseless and was killed on the streets. So, and those are just the stories that we know. We also had Nikki Kuhnhausen, who just last year, after she disappeared for months, her body was finally found after she was killed under the forcibly, wasn't actually effective, but we know that the gay scare or trans scare defense, or gay panic or trans panic defense is used by people who murder after they find out that an intimate partner is trans. And so we are dealing with very serious issues. And we need to ensure that as we start building policies around housing, around social services, around real representation, that we are uplifting our most impacted communities.
Yeah. Yeah, and I noticed when, thank you for that. And I noticed when my daughter first came out trans about 3 years ago, she's 20 now, we were able to reach out to SMRC and some other programs to get resources. But I was really surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, of just the challenges she was having and has had on public transportation, even in such a liberal city as Portland. And so I got to really understand more about how our trans community is impacted in terms of living their true life. And so it's been super impactful and helpful with also the launch of our LGBTQ plus house partnership with Quest Center. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, and it's the tragedy, you know, for a trans woman, their life expectancy is half of a cisgender person. And the reality, and what's heartbreaking for me was, yeah, we were the LGBT community center. We were a safe place for the trans community, but getting to the Q Center or leaving the Q Center, can I promise your safety? No, you could walk. Like when I was at Q Center, I literally saw a trans woman who was attacked by two dudes, cis dudes, you know? So it is devastating. It is devastating to know how much we need to really address the issue of hate and bigotry in our communities.
Well, Cameron, it's 9:30, and I really want to, I know you got such a busy, schedule out there, campaigning virtually and doing all the other work that you're doing. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us over here at Bridges to Change. And we are super excited about, I'm super excited about seeing your name on the ballot, and I hope our listeners get super excited about it as well. So
yeah,
when they check District 5, they're like, I know that guy.
Well, I would just say, Monta, I am so inspired by your leadership and hearing about the number of partnerships that you have with other organizations that are near and dear to my heart. And that is the way that we move forward. We have to work together to build better solutions that benefit all people. That's the work that I hope to do, and I hope to do that with Bridges to Change. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
All right, be blessed. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.